so much for joining us. Why don't you just quickly introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and what you have to offer.
Okay, my name is Eva Tone. I'm with MNP. We just recently merged with MNP. Before that, I started my own business from scratch, so I can definitely relate to the entrepreneurial journey, the drive to want to start your own business, why people start their own businesses, and the values around creating your own business and how that becomes your baby. And I am going to speak to that in a little more factual way later on, because it is very emotional starting your own business. I did the same with a business partner. We started it from scratch. We stepped out on our own, started our own business, and scaled it up very quickly. And so I do understand making decisions quickly and day-to-day decisions and how it impacts you. And I never had that safety net of being like, now I do, but being with a larger firm. And I think you make decisions differently when they impact you right away. And I remember making payroll. I remember at the end of the month saying to my business partner and to my husband, like, we're making payroll, right? Like, so I remember those days. And yeah, so on that note, I'm with MNP, and the great thing about being with MNP is the resources and the network and all the services we have to offer and all the areas of specialization. So I'll speak to that in the end, because I think there's a lot of resources that we can offer during these times, because overall the messaging will need to be that people really need to evaluate their business. And for some, that will mean, you know, scaling up. There's a lot of people talking about acquisitions and really getting into the market and taking this opportunity where a lot of people have their eye off the ball and just going in and doing mergers and acquisitions. And there's other people that maybe should evaluate whether their business should continue. And we have an insolvency department and a debt restructuring department. So that's not a bad thing. Like, that's help. Mm-hmm. And you need to understand when you need to clean that area up, right?
Right.
So maybe I'll just go through kind of some notes that I took in preparation of this, and what I would be thinking about. And some of the things is I go back to bare bones, and I think about the thing that I think is impacting your industry is capacity constraints, right? And someone like me doesn't have capacity constraints, right? Like, we can all work from home. You are offering a service. You're not offering a product that someone else can just pivot and go buy somewhere else, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there that haven't been able to like maintain themselves, whether that's like hair or nails or face or treatments. Like, that's something you can't easily replace. And I think you should really realize the value in that, right? Right. And people should consider maybe increasing their fees and their pricing, because it's not an easily substitutable product that you're offering. And people are going to be there for you. It's either your personality, the way you're offering your service, or because you're just more artistic than someone else, right? And you're offering a better product. And that's not easily replaceable. It's not easily purchased on Amazon. So I think people need to go back to their fixed costs and their variable costs. And I don't know if people truly understand that difference. Mm-hmm. This whole situation probably is making the math easy, because when your business shuts down, all your variable costs are gone and you just have your fixed costs, right? And your revenue is gone. So you can kind of quickly see what your monthly burn rate is, like, just to keep the lights on, how much it's costing you. And what I would do is I'd look at that number and I'd divide it by my price, and I'd say, okay, if my cost me $10,000 a month to keep everything running, and it's just your services, let's say your time, and you charge $100, then oh my God, I hope I can do the math on this. Is that 100?
Yeah, 10,000 and
100, that's 100. So that would mean that you have to do 100 services, right? And if you look at your capacity constraint and your time limits and everything, maybe you say, well, I can't do 100 service, I can only do 80. Then you need to look at maybe expanding your hours, like trying to get that number of services up, or increase your pricing. So I think that's something people should look at. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I love it. So maybe just a couple of concepts here that we could just build on a little bit out and maybe explain it to you a tad. You talked about this concept of capacity. Can you just sort of define that for us a little bit? Like, what is that? What does it look like?
So that is how much output you can do, right? So capacity is usually based on your hours. So there's going to be people that can still, like, if you think of the space restraints that are being put on, like the spacing requirements, maybe you used to have 5 people operating in a space, and now you're only allowed 4 because of the social distancing requirements, right? There's 20% gone just because of government imposed restrictions.
Got it. Okay. So we can just define capacity as whatever, it's kind of like how much water is going through the pipe, right?
Yes. Or how big the pipe, how big you're allowed to make the pipe, right? Because I'd say the water through your pipes is probably your clients, and they're probably right there, like all ready to go now,
yeah,
right?
They are.
Yeah. And then I think your pipe has been narrowed, right, by the social distancing. So you either need to put through higher quality water,
right,
or add another pipe, right? Because you kind of want that output in the end.
Awesome. And you also mentioned variable versus fixed costs. Can you just quickly kind of in a simple way kind of define what those two costs are and how they look differently?
So like a variable cost would be like a staff member, or say you have staff that are cutting the hair, right? And you are paying them on commission, or you have hourly employees that are doing nails, for example, right? That varies with how many bookings you have, right? So that's directly related to, are you doing 50 services or 100, right? Then that cost increases exactly in line with your service offerings. Fixed is what you have no matter what. So you pay your rent and your utilities no matter whether you have 1 customer or 1,000.
Got it. All right. Obviously. And I suppose the key is, how can people variabilize their costs? That's another term that has been thrown around a little bit. Maybe just describe how people can variabilize costs now that we got the smaller pipe, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so how do we accommodate that if we cannot add more services, boost up the quality of the services, work on higher margin? How can we variabilize our costs?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. And I think there's going to be a lot of cross training, right? I think there was some luxury items that people had, like maybe cleaning, maybe having a receptionist that was calling everyone and booking, and the day before saying, are you still coming? Maybe that's an email now. Maybe some things are going to have to get automated, right? Yeah, and cross training, like maybe the person that was doing the till, right? A separate person that was collecting your cash at the end. Maybe you don't need that person there anymore, right? Or someone stocking the product or selling the product at the front. Maybe that's the person providing the service, just has to add on those couple of minutes and do that, instead of having that whole cost throughout the year of having a front desk person.
Gotcha. So it's just an exercise in really reallocating some of your expenses and variabilizing those down a little bit to accommodate to balance things out a bit more, right?
And looking at people's duties, right? And saying these are all the duties that are being done in a day or in a month, right? Can instead of 4 people doing all of that, can maybe 3 people do that, right? And looking at things like that. And I think there's been a lot of costs that everyone, like myself included, have had on their balance sheet where you're like, oh, it's fine, you're still making a profit and it doesn't hurt as much. And now where you're turning every dollar, you should reevaluate some of those. And those could be like maybe marketing, right? Like look at things like what is making you money, right? There's a lot of social media that people are paying for. There's a lot of extra services that maybe aren't generating you money, and you can cut permanently or maybe temporarily. Maybe, like, I think this is kind of an exciting time because you can do things and make mistakes and try things out, and people are a little bit more forgiving, right? So maybe you cut certain costs and there's certain things you've been doing and you're just going to try out and see, does that have an impact? And I think it's also important to keep good communication with your client base, right? Like, why do you come to me? What's really important? Some people might say it's location. It's the fact that you're downtown and I love coming downtown. I think some people will be surprised that they say that's not important to me. And that some people might say, do I really need this really fancy downtown studio, or are people going to maybe drive a little bit further and you have cheaper rent, right?
That's really interesting. So you could take a much larger, bigger, longer term approach to this whole thing instead of just, okay, should I stop serving water in fancy mugs and say, maybe I need to move postal codes?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, and this is a super hot topic that we've heard about 1,000 times. How do salons recover? In what way can they bring more money in? We talked about the pipe and the higher quality water through it. There's two approaches, and I'd love to hear what your opinion is and what your evaluation is of both. And of course, you can raise your prices. So you just take whatever it is you're charging and raise them from here until whenever. I'm thinking there's a permanent aspect to that. And then the other side is to have like a COVID charge. And so there are people who are doing price increases. There are people who are doing a COVID charge. And there are people who are doing neither. So maybe you can talk to us about how each of those kind of play in.
Yeah. I don't know how I would feel about a COVID charge. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I would do a permanent price increase because I think we need to consider that this will be a long-term thing, right? We don't know if this is going to be a month or 2 or 6. And I think people should evaluate when was the last time they did a price increase, right? If they are at the top of the market, then maybe you do a temporary COVID charge. I think if you're at the top of the market, I would suck it up and I wouldn't do a price increase, right? I think if you're at the bottom of the market, this is a time, in my opinion, for all industries, for the bottom to just drop out a bit and for quality and efficiencies to just like to shave off the bottom, maybe 20% of the market.
Okay, that's a loaded one. That's a big one. Talk to us about that. When you say shave off, do you mean to close up? Like the bottom 20% of the market should just look at ways to transition to either another career or another space within the industry. And I do want to get back to pricing, but let's just stop there.
I know that sounds harsh, but I think that there's like certain markets have been oversaturated, right? And when people are competing on price, then it's just a race to the bottom, right? And those people that are at the bottom, they're probably like emotionally just struggling more, right? Because they're competing on price. And those are the people where I think you go back to your core values, right? You love what you're doing. You love what you're doing. Okay, maybe you become employed by someone else and you can still love what you're doing, right? You don't have that stress. I think when you're operating in that bottom tier, you're just stressed, right?
Yeah, well, Simon Sinek wrote "Start with Why," right? Start with why, and then go from there. So, should we really be visiting? I mean, we look at the numbers, and they're just dollars and cents ultimately, right? I mean, they're not very sexy in terms of like what they do as an artistic. I mean, they're just the way to kind of function and how to get through the day and really how to achieve what it is you want to achieve. Is it more though about the why? And you mentioned something earlier before this started. You know, you used the term freedom. Can people still satisfy their values and satisfy their why, even if they don't own their own business, or what do you think about that? I mean, certainly from a money perspective, that is a factor, right?
Yeah, I don't think you make more money just because you own your own business.
Okay, all right. There's a
I'll tell you
quote.
that.
There's a bumper sticker.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of stress. I think there's a lot of stress that comes with that, right? And I think it's when you're in a very creative industry and you're draining yourself, speaking to people, like you guys have a very high touch, and by high touch I mean like emotional high touch, not physical. Well, I guess physical too, industry where you're giving a lot of yourselves, right? And then to go home and also worry about your own business, I think can be very draining. And I think with this shakeup, there might be a lot of people that say, hey, we were kind of operating on our own, like, let's get together, let's merge, let's conglomerate, and like maybe we're stronger together, right? And that they find synergy. So I don't think you really have to give everything up. I think you go back to your why and your values, and you can still, it'll look different, but it'll probably still feel the same and like fill those buckets that you want to fill. So I think if people go back to the basics, you can still make decisions that feel and look different to what you have, but in the end, it'll like for you feels the same, right? That I went through the same thing when we decided on merging. I went back to why did I start my business and what are my core values? And when I have difficult decisions, I always go back to that because that'll keep you happy.
Yeah. And these are wise words. I mean, how do you know from, let's kind of pull it back to your wheelhouse. How do you know from a financial standpoint when you really should consider following your why more than anything else, or your values? Is it like you say, when you can't sleep at night? Is it like you say, when you maybe won't be able to retire with dignity, when it bothers you more than it satisfies you? How do you, from your perspective and from your, your vantage point, when you look at the dollars and cents, when do you feel that?
Maybe more clarity over the question, maybe.
Is it just like you feel like, is there a treading water? Like, how do you?
Yeah, well, I think nobody ever went into business to be worried.
Okay, like that.
Right? Yeah. So I think people, like I would ask, why did you go into business? And the reason I went into business was freedom, right? Flexibility over my workday, and to like it energizes me to make decisions, right? And to have an impact on the direction, right? So I think you can find that in a lot of ways.
Is there a point that people should just consider becoming an employee? I was actually speaking to somebody this morning.
Yeah.
This individual is a leader in a fairly large international organization. And I kid you not, he sent a note to me on WhatsApp today. He goes, I just want to become an employee. I'm sort of leaving my leadership behind, and I just want to fit into this organization as a fairly straightforward employee, and I can give more in that way. Like, when do we, what do you say to somebody from a financial perspective? What should they do there? How might that impact their life?
I don't think just because you're a business owner, it's always financially better, right? Like you do take on a lot more risk. And I think you can structure things. I'm sure this is a super valuable person, and that there's a business owner that might really want them as a right-hand man or woman, right? And I'm sure you can go there and say, this is what I'm currently making, and I'll switch if I can get this. And I do think people should evaluate all their people and maybe rank them, right? And because there might be another downturn, who knows, right? Who can you live without, and who's super crucial to your business? I think another problem with your industry coming back is that there might be a lot of minimum wage people that might not be willing to return because they're getting the $2,000 on the CERB.
Yeah.
Right? What do you do with that?
That's a really good point. And we talked about that yesterday, and that how do you get employees to come back if they're getting that money, at this point? And then your business could change when the CERB stops. What do those people do, and how will the business change, right? And I guess that gives you an opportunity to go through a cycle from a business perspective and say, maybe I don't need that person. Like you said, you could do a job for 3, that took 4 people and boil it down to 3.
Yeah.
Is there a risk though for employees in that sense? I mean, if you're an owner, do you have an obligation to kind of protect your staff, even though it may cost you money? I mean, where's that?
And that I don't know. That'll be something that Chris will have to help with. That I don't know. Yeah, legally what you're allowed to do, right?
Right.
I have heard of stories of people reaching out to part-time staff saying, do you want to come back? This is what you'll be doing. And then they just say, no, I'm making more on the CERB. And then they quit. They terminate, they give their notice. So I mean, then legally now that person's gone and you don't have a responsibility. So I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some opportunity here. So if you are, let's say, a middle level salon, and you're charging sort of mid-level prices and mid-level services, what sort of opportunities are there, do you think, in the market in terms of scooping up some new business and perhaps getting into a new space and becoming more profitable, becoming more financially viable, and being able to plan a little bit more? How do you see businesses kind of stepping into that space?
Yeah, I wonder how important location is, right?
Okay.
Like I know I will drive to my hairdresser. I don't care where she is, but I do love the environment that's created, right? So that's maybe where you can do some, as you're revisiting all your clients, you can say like, what do you miss most? Like, where should we place the highest value, right? And maybe it isn't location, right? We're doing the same with our business, where we're wondering, we see people aren't wanting to come back to the office, right? So it's like, how important is our office space, right? And that's the same as with your industry, that I would consider that office space, right? So that's one thing I would do. I would do some like research directly with my clients as you're sitting down and meeting with them. And I mean, there are going to be businesses that are increasing their prices, and those customers are price sensitive and they'll drop off, right? And they will go to other businesses. So I think there will be a shakeup.
Do you think there's an opportunity though, because there will be closings on all levels? There will be some higher end or higher-ish end places that are going to close up, and those clients are going to want to, they're not going to want to go to a lower end salon. They're going to want to maintain their level of service and their experience and, you know, wherever it is. So is there still, even though there may be a loss of some of those clients who aren't willing to pay, is it a good opportunity to fill that void with people who are willing to pay more?
Yes. And even just speaking from my own experiences, like if my service rates were to go up, which I was telling my hairdresser to do the same, and I'm sitting there in the chair saying, this is an opportunity for you to raise your rates, right? I would just go less often, right? I probably would still stick to my annual like beauty budget, but I think people have been without that service for a long time, that maybe instead of going every 6 weeks, you go every 7 or 8, right? So you're creating, you're getting more of your own time, right? You're still going to get that full annual revenue from that customer, but maybe instead of them visiting you 10 times a year, they're coming 9 times a year, right? So you're getting more time, right?
Yeah, although I sometimes make this comparison back in the day when there were flip phones. Do you remember that time?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Your flip phone cost you maybe $40 or $50.
Yeah.
And your service was maybe 12 or 25 bucks or whatever it was. And that's just what your budget was for a phone. But then as phones changed and they became these sort of things that you needed and wanted, and they were a fashion statement, and they were a lot of things, right? Now we're looking at $1,000 phones, and we're looking at $85 plans, and nobody.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Nobody would ever want, if you walked out with a flip phone, you'd be like, well, what's wrong with you? Could we see that in businesses who want to become like a flip phone salon to an iPhone salon?
Yeah. With your analogy, I totally buy in. Yeah.
Good. So you're going to spend more money. But it could be a good opportunity for salons who have been waiting for that flip to take it, right? Would you?
Yeah, and they can try it, right? And I think the market is just more forgiving, right? Like you raise your rates, you see the impact right away. Are people not coming? Are they coming back? And then you can easily pivot, right?
Gotcha.
So if it doesn't go well and you see a drop of your clientele, which won't happen in the beginning because like that funnel is, those people are all ready, right? And you're going to get that immediate feedback, right? Like you're sitting with the people and you can say like, what do you think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I love the idea of actually going to your clients, because after all, they're already there, right? You've already got, and the key is, there's acquisition, retention, and growth. And you could probably score on all of those things, could you not? You could acquire new customers who are leaving salons that have closed down. You are going to retain if you, like you say, improve a little bit, but you could grow them too. Like maybe we could get Eva to spend a bit more money annually, to go.
Yeah.
And maybe if you are only going every 7 weeks instead of every 6, you could buy a color preservation shampoo, right? So there's a retail item there. Yeah. From a cash flow perspective, Eva, what's the first thing businesses should do in this industry? I mean, where do you kind of start from a money perspective? You can't just jump into things. So what sort of things should you take into consideration? Do you have to go and get some help with? Because it's always tricky understanding cash flow and forward forecasting and knowing when to, fail fast, fail cheap. Where do you start?
I think Excel is great. Look at your last year, like income statement. Okay. And I think you can easily like just play with that and project it out. Look at your revenues, your number of customers, look at like, I think people usually know who their VIP customers are, and maybe go back to like the whole why and the values, right? Like, why are those your ideal customers, right? Is it because you enjoy your time with them? Is it because they're getting multiple services, right? Is it because they're not complaining? Like, I think we all rank our customers, right?
Right.
And then there's a certain, like, the bottom can drop out, right? And you'll be happier. There's people that drain you, right? And maybe those are ones you don't want to have back.
So maybe send your worst customer to your best competitor?
Maybe.
Not the nicest thing to do, but.
But I think there's an opportunity. Like, one of the things that I was thinking that I know we do in our industry is kind of share data, right? Like, maybe you guys do like a quiz thing, like, what are your average price ranges? How much time do you spend on each client? What are extra services you're providing? What are some of the things you're doing? And you can kind of get a scale, right? And then people can slot themselves in and figure out, like, oh, I'm on the upper end or I'm on the lower end. And it also works with costs. Like, are people paying 60% commission or 40% commission or 50% commission? Like, what are people doing internally that a lot of people aren't sharing, right? So I think you can create these forums, and together as a market, maybe you can do things.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable, because then you know where you stand. Otherwise, you're sort of running around in the dark. And I know a lot of large corporations spend pretty much all their time looking at what their competitors' pricing is, right? I mean, Air Canada, WestJet, it's always within $1 or $2 of each other. And it's not because they're just making it up. It's because they actually have machines looking at other prices. So,
but I think that market is one where you can just go and get the same thing somewhere else, right? Like, you're sitting in a plane, you're going from destination A to destination B. I think with the beauty market, like, you're getting a creative product or higher quality service, like, you can't really easily replace. Like, if someone said to me, okay, go to this hairdresser, I'd be like, oh, okay, can I first see what she does?
Right.
Like, I'd be a little bit more apprehensive than just trying something out.
Sure. Yeah, it's your personal appearance, and you don't, it's different. If you have a lousy flight, you just won't use that airline again. But
yeah, you're still going to get to your destination, right? Which was the goal. And so I think your industry has a little more pricing power than they might realize.
So that's an interesting sort of take then, is that it's a good opportunity to raise your prices based on a couple of things. First of all, what you have to offer, maybe a way to enhance the experience in the environment, but really kind of revisit to the why and your own personal values, and make sure that those are congruent with what you want to do every day. I mean, you really should go to work. You should go to work and leave work in a happy state, right? In a satisfied state.
And I think if you were stressed before, like, if you're running through those scenarios, should someone keep their business, become an employee, if you were stressed before during the good times, like.
Yeah, 100% for sure. It's only going to get more difficult, right? I mean, as you go through any financial challenges, and certainly as these, things that begin to accumulate. Don't forget all these CERB and everything else, not CERB, but the other assistance programs. They are a liability in the long term, right?
And I think some of them are going to give a false sense of security, right? Like the wage subsidy, like, that's just temporary. That's a help temporary, right? That's not a true permanent cost saving that you should put into your business model. Like, subsidies aren't part of your business model, right? And the rent reduction, again, that's great, but it's temporary, right? So.
And these things will go. The virus will go, and they will go, and we'll be left with debt. So we need to be ready for that, right?
And I think it's a good opportunity to maybe go talk to your competitors and say, what are you doing? I think people are very, I speak to my competitors too. Like, I think it's good to be friendly and help each other out, right? So I think maybe more of that'll happen, and you never know, maybe there's people that'll just like get together, right?
Yeah.
It does create a lot of opportunity.
That's for sure. Well, this is great. A wonderful silver lining on this cloud that we're in. So it's a nice way to look at it, for sure. Any closing remarks, Eva? Is there anything you want to share just just before we wrap it up?
That I think, like, overall, I know from an accounting perspective, it's easy to say, yeah, just increase your prices. And I know it's not that easy, right? Like, and that's not the only solution, right? And it'll work for some and it won't work for others. And I think the focus will be to also look at your costs, and the solution will be different for everyone. And I think you always need to go back to who are your clients, what's your ideal client, and why are you doing what you do, right?
Yeah, very good points.
Mhm.
Eva, tell people how they can get a hold of you.
My email address, I guess we can post that, but that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then you can find all MNP offices online. I work from the Langley one and the North Van one, and otherwise everyone at MNP is a good resource. And I think the one service that I would like to put out there for people to consider is the insolvency and the debt restructuring.
Okay.
And to just have that conversation. You might leave at the end saying, you know what? Yeah, a professional just told me I can do this and I can get through this. And that might be all you need to just keep going, right? And it might also be that someone says, you know, there's other options here. And now's your chance to maybe just reshift your whole plan. So I think that's what I'd leave off with. And I think it's a positive and a negative.
Yeah, no, it is. It's good. It's, you know, the last thing you want to do is sort of keep going, throwing good money after bad, as my grandmother used to say. You want to know sort of, if you're not in the right place, whether it's, you know, emotionally or financially, there's no better time to kind of transition to something else, right?
And it might be a relief. And then you go to your competitor and say, I've always admired your business. Can I come work with you now? Right. And you might be happier.
Yeah. And then when I go home, that's it.
Yeah.
There's a beauty to that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Eva, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for the whole series this week. It's just been extraordinary. And we'll keep in touch. We'll see you again, hopefully back here.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting us.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.